The crystal wine glass shattered against the marble floor, not by accident, by design. Marcus Calloway, the tech billionaire worth $8.7 billion, had thrown it there deliberately, his cold eyes fixed on the young waitress who'd served him 30 seconds earlier. The Summit Club, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, where meals cost more than most people's monthly rent, fell silent. "Do you see this?" Marcus's voice cut through the hushed dining room like a blade. "This is what incompetence looks like." Elena Martinez stood frozen, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her serving tray. She'd been warned about Marcus Calloway. Every server at the Summit Club knew his reputation, but warnings couldn't prepare you for the reality of being in the crosshairs of a man who'd built an empire by crushing anyone he deemed beneath him. Before we continue with what happened next, let me ask you something. Where are you watching this from? Drop your location in the comments below, and if you believe in treating everyone with respect regardless of their bank account, hit that subscribe button for Heart Vault Story. Trust me, you'll want to see how this plays out. Now, back to that shattered glass and the humiliation about to unfold. Tonight was supposed to be Marcus's triumph. Sitting across from him were 3 Japanese investors, representing a $500 million deal that would cement his legacy as the most ruthless CEO in tech history. He'd worn his most expensive suit, reserved the best table, and ordered the most prestigious wine. Everything had to be perfect. And then Elena had poured his water. "The temperature is wrong," Marcus announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Are you incompetent or just lazy?" Elena's voice came out steady despite the heat rising to her cheeks. "I apologize, Mr. Calloway. I'll bring you." "I don't want your apologies. I want people who can do their jobs." He picked up his napkin and threw it at her face. It hit her cheek and fell to the floor. "Now clean up this mess you've caused." The Japanese investors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One of them, an older gentleman with silver hair and an unreadable expression, leaned forward slightly, watching Elena with unexpected intensity. What Marcus didn't notice, what he couldn't notice through his fog of arrogance and entitlement, was the way Elena's eyes changed in that moment. The trembling stopped. Her spine straightened. And when she bent down to pick up the shattered glass, there was something in her expression that looked almost like anticipation? "You know what your problem is?" Marcus continued, warming to his performance. He gestured at Elena dismissively. "People like you think you deserve respect just for showing up, but respect is earned. And looking at you, I'd say you're failing at the most basic level." He turned to his investors with a conspiratorial smile. "This is what happens when restaurants hire charity cases. She probably can't even read the menu properly." One of the investors, the silver-haired man, finally spoke. His voice was quiet, but something in his tone made Marcus's smile falter. "Calloway-san, perhaps we should." "Oh, don't worry about her," Marcus interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. "She's nobody, completely irrelevant to people like us." Elena stood up slowly, the broken glass carefully arranged on her tray. She met Marcus's eyes for just a moment, and he could have sworn he saw something there. Not hurt, not shame. Something else entirely. Knowledge. She walked toward the kitchen with measured steps, pausing only to whisper something to the restaurant manager. Whatever she said made the manager's eyes widen in alarm. Marcus returned his attention to the investors, ready to seal his $500 million deal. He had no idea his entire world was about to collapse. And it would start with 3 words from the waitress he'd just humiliated. 10 minutes later, Elena returned to the table. But something had changed. The nervousness was gone. The trembling hands were steady. She moved with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen and was looking forward to it. Marcus barely glanced at her as she refilled water glasses, too busy bragging to his investors about his latest acquisition. "I paid $200 million for that company just to shut it down," he laughed. "Their CEO actually cried. Weakness disgusts me. In business, you crush or you get crushed." The Japanese investors remained oddly quiet. The silver-haired man whom Marcus had been trying to impress all evening hadn't touched his food. Instead, he watched Elena with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. If you're loving this story so far, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button for Heart Vault Story, because what happens next is going to blow your mind. I promise you've never seen a plot twist like this. As Elena placed Marcus's dessert in front of him, she leaned in slightly, close enough that only he could hear her next words. "My condolences about tomorrow's board meeting, Mr. Calloway." Marcus's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. His entire body went rigid. The board meeting, the secret one. The hostile takeover attempt that only 5 people in the world knew about. Board members who'd been quietly conspiring to remove him as CEO were planning their move tomorrow at 9 a.m. How could a waitress possibly know about that? "Excuse me?" Marcus's voice came out strangled. "What did you just say?" Elena straightened up, her smile serene and maddeningly calm. "I said, enjoy your dessert, Mr. Calloway." "No." Marcus grabbed her wrist, his fingers tight enough to hurt. "You said something about a board meeting. How do you know about?" "Marcus-san." The silver-haired investor's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Remove your hand from my daughter. Now." The world tilted. Marcus's grip loosened. He stared at Elena, then at the investor, then back at Elena. "Your daughter?" "Allow me to properly introduce myself," the older man said, his voice cold enough to freeze fire. "I am Hiroshi Tanaka, and yes, Elena is my daughter." The blood drained from Marcus's face. Hiroshi Tanaka. The Hiroshi Tanaka. The Japanese investment mogul who controlled a financial empire worth $40 billion. The man whose consortium had been mysteriously buying up shares of Callaway Industries for the past 6 months. The man who now controlled 34% of Marcus's company. "This is impossible," Marcus whispered. "She's a waitress. I graduated top of my class from Wharton Business School," Elena said quietly, removing her apron. Underneath, she wore an expensive designer suit that probably cost more than a month's wages at the restaurant. "I've been working here for 3 years, not because I needed the money, Mr. Calloway, because my father wanted to see how industry leaders treated people who couldn't advance their careers." Marcus's phone began buzzing, then buzzing again and again. Emergency notifications are flooding in, his assistant, his board members, his PR team. With shaking hands, he looked at the screen. Twitter was exploding with a hashtag, Sokane Calloway cruelty. Videos from other servers, screenshots of complaints, a viral thread documenting years of his abusive behavior toward restaurant staff. "You've been watching me," Marcus breathed. "All this time, you've been documenting," Elena finished. "Every insult, every thrown napkin, every time you snapped your fingers at a server like they were a dog, every person you called nobody because you thought they didn't matter." Hiroshi stood up, placing a document folder on the table. "Mr. Calloway, I am withdrawing my $500 million investment. Furthermore, the consortium I represent will vote for your removal as CEO tomorrow morning." Marcus's world was crumbling, but he couldn't accept it. Wouldn't accept it. He lunged forward, desperation making him reckless. "Please, I didn't know who she was. If I'd known." And that's when Elena delivered the words that would haunt Marcus Calloway for the rest of his life. "That's exactly the problem, Mr. Calloway." Elena's voice rang out across the silent restaurant. Every diner, every server, every person in that exclusive space had stopped to watch the most powerful man in tech beg a waitress for mercy. "You wouldn't have treated me differently if you'd known who I was," Elena continued, her voice steady and devastating. "You would have treated me the same way if I couldn't hurt you. That's the point you'll never understand." Marcus's face had gone from red to white to a sickly gray. His hands gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned bone white. I can change. I swear, I'll apologize. I'll make donations. You'll do nothing, Hiroshi Tanaka interrupted, his voice quiet but absolute. Because you are finished, Calloway-san. Before you find out what happens next, I need you to do something. Hit that subscribe button for Heart Vault Story right now. Seriously. Because stories like this, stories about karma, justice, and the powerful getting exactly what they deserve, are what we're all about. Don't miss a single one. Marcus tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. Around him, the other diners had their phones out, recording, uploading. Within minutes, this moment would be everywhere. Every social media platform, every news outlet, every business blog. Do you know what I learned working here? Elena asked, and there was something almost pitying in her voice now. I learned that character reveals itself in the smallest moments. How you treat a server. How do you speak to someone who can't fight back? My father built his fortune on one principle: never trust a man who's cruel to those who can do nothing for him. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a leather portfolio. I'm starting as VP of Operations at Tanaka Enterprises next week. We're launching a direct competitor to Callaway Industries, and I've spent 3 years studying exactly how not to run a company by watching you. The restaurant erupted in applause. Servers, kitchen staff, and even other diners began clapping. The sound grew louder and louder until it was thunderous. Marcus stood frozen in the center of it all, a billionaire emperor with no empire left. Security will escort you out, Elena said. She removed the class ring from her finger, a Wharton ring that probably cost more than Marcus had tipped in his entire life, and held it up to the light. By the way, remember that server you fired last month for talking back, when she asked you not to snap your fingers at her? She's my new director of human resources. Marcus's mouth opened and closed, like a fish drowning in air. This is justice, Elena offered. Karma? Or maybe just the natural consequence of spending years treating human beings like they're disposable. Hiroshi stood, buttoning his jacket with the precision of a man who just won a war without raising his voice. The other Japanese investors followed suit. Our business here is concluded, he announced. Marcus finally found his voice, and it came out as a desperate, broken thing. The deal, the $500 million, my company, you can't. I already have, Hiroshi said simply. The press release goes out in the morning. By the time the markets open, Callaway Industries stock will be in free fall. Your board will have no choice but to remove you, and the reputation you've spent 20 years building, gone by sunrise. Security arrived. 2 large men in suits who'd probably escorted Marcus to his table with respect dozens of times before. Now they looked at him with something between pity and disgust. As they led him toward the exit, Marcus turned back one last time. Elena stood there in her designer suit, surrounded by applauding staff, her father's hand on her shoulder. She looked every inch the business leader she was about to become. And Marcus Calloway looked exactly like what he was, a small, cruel man whose arrogance had finally written a check his billions couldn't cash. The glass door closed behind him with a soft click. By morning, he would wake up to discover he'd lost everything. But that's a story for the next part. Make sure you're subscribed to Heart Vault Story because the aftermath of this confrontation is something you absolutely cannot miss. The morning after came with the subtlety of a nuclear explosion. Marcus Calloway woke up in his 40 million penthouse to 847 missed calls, 3,000 unread emails, and a net worth that had dropped by $4 billion overnight. His face was plastered across every major news outlet with headlines that would have been unthinkable 24 hours earlier. Tech titans fall from grace, the waitress who destroyed a billionaire, Callaway Industries CEO removed after viral abuse video, from 8.7B to disgrace, how arrogance cost everything. His hands shook as he scrolled through the damage. The video from the restaurant had 87 million views. His own employees were sharing stories of his abuse. Brand partnerships were canceled. Investors were fleeing. The empire he'd spent 20 years building was collapsing in real time. The board meeting that morning lasted exactly 12 minutes. Marcus wasn't even invited to attend. By noon, he'd been officially removed as CEO of Callaway Industries, retaining only an 8% minority stake in the company he'd founded. His voting rights revoked. His office cleared out while he slept. His legacy destroyed. But the real devastation wasn't financial. It was walking through Manhattan, a city where he'd once been treated like royalty, and seeing people recognize him, whisper, and turn away with disgust. It was calling friends who suddenly didn't answer. It was realizing that without his power, without his money, without his title, nobody wanted to be near him. Meanwhile, Elena Martinez became an overnight sensation, not as a viral victim, but as a hero. Her grace under pressure, her strategic thinking, her refusal to be diminished, it resonated with millions of people who'd ever been treated as less than because of their job, their background, their station in life. Within a week, she'd been invited to speak at Harvard Business School. Major news outlets wanted interviews. Her LinkedIn post about dignity in the workplace had 12 million engagements. And Tanaka Enterprises, her father's company, announced a revolutionary new business model focused on ethical leadership and employee dignity. Several of Marcus's former employees, including servers from Summit Club, joined her team. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. 3 months passed. Marcus's therapist, his court-mandated therapist, required as part of the settlement from multiple lawsuits, suggested something radical. You need to understand service from the other side. That's how Marcus Callaway, former Billionaire CEO, found himself volunteering at a homeless shelter in Queens, serving meals, cleaning tables, being snapped at by people who were having their worst days, being invisible. One evening, as he wiped down tables alongside other volunteers, he overheard 2 of them talking. "Did you see that video about dignity in the workplace?" one said. "That woman, Elena something? She said the best test of character is how you treat people who can't help your career." Marcus's hand stopped mid-wipe. "Yeah," the other volunteer replied. "Makes you think about all the people we pass by every day without really seeing them, you know?" They didn't recognize him. To them, he was just another volunteer, just another person trying to do something good. For the first time in months, Marcus felt something other than shame. He felt small, but not in a crushing way. Small in a way that made room for other people to be big too. That night, he watched Elena's TED Talk, the one that had 15 million views, the one where she talked about her experience at Summit Club without ever mentioning his name. "True character isn't revealed when people are watching," Elena said on the screen, her voice calm and certain. "It's revealed when you think no one important is. But here's what I learned. Every person is important. Every interaction is a test of who you really are." Marcus closed his laptop and sat in the darkness of his now modest apartment. He had one more person he needed to see. 6 months after the night that changed everything, Marcus walked into a small coffee shop in Brooklyn. He'd chosen this place carefully. It wasn't fancy. No crystal glasses or marble floors, just honest coffee, worn wooden tables, and the kind of atmosphere where everyone was genuinely welcome. Elena was already there. She sat at a corner table with her team, discussing what looked like quarterly projections. She wore a sharp business suit and an expression of focused confidence. She'd been featured on the cover of Fortune magazine last week. The new face of ethical business leadership. Marcus waited near the counter, suddenly uncertain. What was he doing here? What could he possibly say to her? But then Elena looked up, and their eyes met. For a moment, neither moved. The coffee shop noise faded into background static. 6 months ago, she'd been picking up broken glass he'd thrown. Now she was building an empire on principles he'd never understood. Marcus approached slowly, his hands in his pockets. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said quietly when he reached her table. "I don't even know if I deserve the chance to apologize, but I wanted you to know. Thank you." Elena's team shifted protectively closer to her, but she raised a hand. "Thank you," she asked, her tone neutral but not hostile. "You didn't just cost me my company," Marcus continued, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "You gave me a chance to find my humanity. I've spent 6 months learning what it means to serve others, to be invisible, to understand that respect isn't something you demand. It's something you earn through how you treat people who can't advance your agenda." He pulled out his phone and showed her a photo. "He is serving meals at the shelter. This is what I do now, not because a court ordered it, though they did, but because I needed to understand what I'd become, who I'd hurt." Elena studied him for a long moment. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something in her eyes, not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of acknowledgement. "The Marcus Calloway who walked into the Summit Club that night needed to fall," she said finally. "He was dangerous, not just to service workers, but to everyone around him. Power without empathy is just cruelty with a bigger budget." She paused, then asked the question that mattered. "Who will you choose to be now that you've landed?" Marcus didn't have a perfect answer. "Someone better," he said. "Someone who sees people, all people, not as tools or obstacles, but as people." Elena nodded slowly. It wasn't absolution. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was acknowledgement that change, real change, might be possible. As Marcus turned to leave, Elena spoke once more. "Mr. Calloway? That server you humiliated, the one I hired as my director of human resources? She wants to talk to you, not for your benefit, for hers, to hear you acknowledge what you did." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "I'll reach out to her, and I'll listen to whatever she needs to say." "That's a start," Elena said. Outside the coffee shop, Marcus stood on the sidewalk as people rushed past him. Busy New Yorkers with places to be, none of them knowing or caring who he used to be. And for the first time in his life, that felt like freedom. Your true character isn't measured by your bank account, your title, or your power. It's measured in the small moments when you think no one is watching. Because here's the truth. Everyone is important, and everyone is watching. Treat people with dignity, not because of what they can do for you, but because it's the right thing to do. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think differently about how you treat others, then subscribe to Heart Vault Story right now. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell because we share stories that matter. Stories about justice, redemption, and the power of treating every human being with the respect they deserve. Don't just watch, be part of our community. Subscribe to Heart Vault Story today.